All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out. Welcome to the a rebranding of the Lives Well Lived calls last year. Now I'm calling it the Online Chat Cafe, and otherwise known as Lunch with Rory today. So welcome to our first call out of the gate, the Online Chat Cafe, where we're going to have lively monthly online learning aimed at keeping you inspired, on target, and connected. So cool guests, interesting discussions, one happy you, hopefully. That's my mission, at least. And our guest today is Rory Vaden. He's a self-discipline strategist. His book, Take the Stairs, is a #1 Wall Street, well, I just went a little too far. It was #1 on Wall Street. It was also #1 as well on USA Today, #2 New York Times bestseller. He's also an award-winning entrepreneur, business leader. He co-founded Southwestern Consulting, a multi-million-dollar global consulting practice that helps clients in more than 14 countries drive educated decisions with relevant data. He's also founder of the Center for the Study for Self-Discipline. Rory's also the world's leader on defining the psychology around modern-day procrastination called priority dilution. In fact, he coined the term, and he speaks and consults on how to say no to things that don't matter and yes to the things that do. His clients include companies like Cargill, the $1 Million Roundtable, P&G, Procter & Gamble, True Value Hardware, YPO, Wells Fargo's Advisors, Land O'Lakes, Novartis, and hundreds more. His insights have recently been featured on Fox News, CNN, the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Inc. magazine, Fortune magazine, and the New York Times. And he's also a regular contributor for the American Express, Open Forum, Huffington Post, and the Tennessean. And his articles and insights average more than 4 million views every day. So that's pretty cool. Here's his book, his last book, Take the Stairs, and he's just launched a new book, which hopefully we'll get to at the end of the call, Rory. It's where we have like shameless self-promotion time. All right. And a little bit of noise there. Welcome, Janet. I see you on the line. So let's get started. Without further ado, we've got a pretty meaty conversation, and we'll open up the call to you as well halfway through and also towards the end. So, Rory, as we start the year, we're looking at, what we want to create, where we want to go. We start with like some pretty, pretty cool goals and, like a little bit of vim and vigor and a little energy is to start the year. And one of the things, that you mentioned, you talk about in your book, and in order for us to be successful in achieving our goals this year is having discipline. Doing those little things. It's always, I'm a big baseball fan, Rory, and the difference between the World Series champion and the loser is they do the little things right. So discipline's not it's not sexy, yet it's freeing. What's your take on this notion of having discipline as you approach your life, your business, that kind of thing?
Well, I think for us, I've always been a student of success, and it started from the time that I was very young. My mom sold Mary Kay Cosmetics, and so I grew up, David, around. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
You are, okay. I grew up around women who were always kind of teaching me about the principles of success from the time that I was very young. It also means that I know more about makeup than I do about cars, as I sometimes say, and my mom used to always tell me that success comes down to the choices that we make. And if you just think about to yourself for a second, the last time that you were in front of a set of escalators or some stairs, did you take the stairs? And for the answer, most of us is no. Most people choose the escalator. And it's kind of, we naturally gravitate towards the path of least resistance. We sort of gravitate towards the shortcut, if you will. And over the last 9 years, our team at Southwestern Consulting we're really a coaching company. Sales coaching is really the core part of our business, and We have over 900 active clients that we work with on a daily basis, and you know, as we started to dissect and break apart and understand the most successful people in the world, it was fascinating that, you know, success doesn't really have it's not about your age. It's not about your ethnicity or your religious affiliation or even your educational background or where you grew up or who your parents were. But the one thing that every single successful person has in common is that successful people have formed the habit of doing things they know they should be doing even when they don't feel like doing them. And so that's where we came up with the metaphor of like, take the stairs. It's all about, you know, success is not about taking the escalator. It's about taking the stairs. Now, the Take the Stairs book, I think it's been really fun to watch what's going on with the book. It's been translated into 11 languages, and so it's now starting to spread around the world, which is really cool. But I think part of the reason why is because all the book is 7 misconceptions that people have about self-discipline. And when you read it, you start to understand that successful people literally think differently. Their brain processes choices based upon a different set of criteria from most people's brains, and that enables them to choose a path that is different from everybody else. And so people are realizing that, you know, through these sort of 7 distinctions, that self-discipline isn't as hard as we think when we actually know how to think about it the right way.
So you're saying it's easier than we imagine if we think about it the right way. So what do we have to do to shift our thinking? Because as I said, you know, it's not sexy. Self-discipline, it's like, ugh, you know, some people think it's work. So what do we need to do to shift our thinking and really embrace this notion of, you know, having a plan, working the plan, being diligent in our you know, in what we're up to and what we're creating this year?
Sure. Well, I think the word discipline is not sexy, and yet discipline is sexy. Discipline is what creates freedom in your life. It's what creates money. And so think about it this way. Well, I got an idea. Let me tell you this little. When I grew up in Colorado, Colorado is world famous for the Rocky Mountains, and well, a lot of people think of the Rocky Mountains when they think of Colorado. What they don't realize is that as a state, Colorado is divided almost exactly in half. And so to the eastern part of the state are the Great Kansas Plains. Well, because of that unique topographical landscape, Colorado is one of the only places in the world that has both buffalo and cows. And there is a great lesson to be learned about success and in understanding self-discipline from studying the way that these two creatures respond to storms. So when a storm comes, storms almost always brew from the west, and they roll out towards the east. And what cows do is very natural. A cow can sense that a storm is coming from one direction, and so a cow will run east to try to run away from the storm. Now, the only problem with that is if you know anything about cows, you know they're not really fast, and so the storm actually catches up with them rather quickly. And so without knowing any better, the cows continue to try to outrun the storm. But instead of outrunning the storm, they actually run along with the storm, which maximizes the amount of pain and time and frustration from that storm, which is really silly. And yet humans do the same thing all the time. We spend so much of our lives constantly trying to avoid the inevitable challenges that come along with the difficult circumstances that our very own choices have led us to be in. And I can speak from personal experience on this. You know, just over 10 years ago, I was 45 pounds heavier than I am right now, and I had about $50,000 in personal debt. And people who are in debt, we're always trying to find ways around paying our bills. People who are unhealthy are often making rationalizations for why they can't do anything about it or why it doesn't matter. People who are struggling in their marriage are often trying to avoid the difficult but meaningful conversations that need to be had to reconcile that relationship. Salespeople avoid making sales calls. I mean, and so what the great insight that the ultra performers have made that not yet necessarily everybody else has is this: ultra performers understand problems that are procrastinated on are only amplified. Problems procrastinated on are amplified. In other words, waiting always makes it worse. What buffalo do is very unique for the animal kingdom. Buffalo wait for the storm to cross right over the crest of the peak of the mountaintop. And as the storm rolls over the ridge, and the storm is heading from west to east, instead of turning to run east away from the storm like cows do, what buffalo do is they charge west, and they charge directly into the storm. So they run at the storm, and by running at the storm, they run straight through it because the storm passes over them. And that actually minimizes the amount of pain and time and frustration they experience from that storm. Now notice it's the exact same storm, which is such a great metaphor for life because all of us are dealing with the same types of storms. We all have some marriage issue or a financial struggle or a health issue, or whatever it is, and we don't get to choose whether or not we have storms. We only get to choose how we respond to those storms, and more specifically here, when we respond to those storms. So this buffalo mentality is representative of what the first principle in the book is, which we call the paradox principle of sacrifice. So the paradox principle, simply stated, is this: easy short-term choices lead to difficult long-term consequences. Meanwhile, difficult short-term choices lead to easy long-term consequences. So the great paradox here, which only a few people understand, is that the things that seem like the easier life, eating whatever we want, saying whatever we want, buying whatever we feel like, on credit, and doing those things in the short term are actually the things that create the more difficult life. And inversely, the things that seem hard or, like a sacrifice or discipline, working out or working hard or saving money instead of spending it, those are the things that create the more difficult, or those are the things that create the easier life. So take the stairs is not about making your life as hard as possible. It's about making your life as easy as possible. But it is based on the premise of doing the hardest parts of things as soon as possible. And that is the truth about success. So discipline is what creates freedom. It is the shortest path to the life that we all love. It's just counterculture to the escalated world that we live in. And so most of us don't have that longer-term perspective, and so we're kind of governed more by the here and now. Meanwhile, ultra performers realize problems that are like procrastination and indulgence are really nothing more than creditors that charge us interest.
Yeah, and high interest at that. I know you write in your book about Jeff Dobbins. He's a financial planner and, highly successful. And he didn't really sort of see his success other than, it was all in his approach, sort of a self-discipline, focused, long-term approach that started to, really pay off. So making the sacrifices now of hard work, effort, diligence, making those calls, building his practice bit by bit by bit, and that sort of, as he says in your book, it always made so much sense to me that when you have to pay a price up front for the rewards that come later on. So the first 5 to 10 years of his business take a lot of sacrifice to make the business run the right way. So there's a long-termism too. You got to kind of, it's almost like, either you pay now or you're going to pay a big price later if you don't, if you don't do the right thing now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's move on. Discipline in and of itself is not the only characteristic that's going to drive our success this year. There are other elements to having overall success that come into play, and these are some of the cornerstones of your book. So to me, underneath discipline comes commitment, and I like this quote by Goethe: "Until one is committed, there's hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there's that one elementary truth, that ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans." that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decisions to raising one's favor, all manner of unforeseen incidences and meetings and material assistance which no man could have dreamed of have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic to it. Begin now. By the way, that was attributed to Goethe. It's not. It was actually written by William Hutchison Murray. So
That's a great quote.
yeah.
I never heard that. That's really good.
I love it. So what like commitment, I think, is underlying sort of that discipline. Like if we're committed to something, we're going to do what it takes. I like Les Brown, who you probably have heard about, out of Michigan or Detroit. And, he says, you got to be hungry, and drive and passion and commitment really, are at the underpinning of success. You talk a lot about that in your book, actually, commitment. And it's probably at the root of every success you've had, I know, in your life, Rory. What is it that you've seen in others, and what do you see in your research of, that went into writing the book?
Yeah, commitment is a funny dynamic, and it's one of those things again that there's a take the stairs approach to it, and there's an escalator approach. And I'm reminded of an old story where two gentlemen were in a public restroom, and there's a guy named Bob who's standing in front of the urinal, and Bob has gotten himself into a little bit of a predicament. You see, somehow Bob has managed to drop a $5 bill into the urinal. And right about that time, another guy named Dave walks into the restroom, and he sees Bob. He sees the $5, and he sees Bob kind of contemplating this whole situation. And Dave just kind of says, "Well, wow, what are you going to do, man? That's a pretty tough decision." And so Bob thinks about it for a second. And then out of nowhere, he takes out his wallet, and he grabs a $50 bill, and he throws the $50 into the urinal. And Dave is totally shocked, right? He's like, "Whoa, what are you doing? I can't believe you just did that. That's $50. Are you crazy? Are you outside of your mind? What are you thinking?" And Bob just turns around slowly, and he smiles at him, and he says, "Well, you don't think I'd stick my hand in there for just $5, do you?" And so Bob understood a very important principle as it relates to self-discipline, specifically as it relates to our ability to follow through on commitments. And we call it the buy-in principle of commitment. And the buy-in principle simply states, the more you have invested into something, the less likely you are to let it fail. The more you have invested into something, the less likely you are to let it fail. That's why it's so hard to let go of relationships. We have all this sort of shared experience and love with or history with somebody. It's hard to lose them for whatever reason that you lose them. And so when you look at the buy-in principle, and it says the more you have invested into something, the less likely you are to let it fail, then it's easy to understand that academically, or logically, but it's very hard to live by it pragmatically, because what it suggests is that if we have a commitment that we want to follow through on, then the moment that things get difficult, the moment it gets difficult to keep that commitment, we should increase our investment. We should spend more time, more money, more focus or prayer or love or whatever on whatever that commitment is. But the reality in the escalator world is that most of us do the exact opposite. Most of us keep our commitments conditionally. We keep them as long as they are convenient to do so. And then we typically start to question our commitment and think that maybe it would be easier to do this somewhere else under a different set of circumstances. And so we go looking for a different set of circumstances to somehow make it easier, and we lack commitment and we lack follow-through. And so it really is, it is a decision, just like that quote says, a moment where you choose to be committed. And sometimes people say, well, how do you choose to be committed? And here's what we've seen is the one distinct separation from ultra performers versus everybody else. See, most of us, when it becomes difficult to follow through on something, we typically start to ask ourselves, like, is this realistic? Is this even possible? Should I do this now? Should I do it later? Should I continue on with this? Should I look for something new? We're often asking that question, should. But what the ultra performers do that's just a little bit different is they ask the question, how? So and the moment you ask the question, how, it's like your mind transcends all limitations. You break free of these belief barriers and these mental prisons of your own construction about what is possible for your life and what isn't possible. When you ask the question how, your creativity engages and you start processing on what the answer could be rather than worrying about whether or not it's realistic. So you increase your level of commitment and thereby the likelihood of your success by intentionally creating the question how, so that you don't accidentally relent to the question should. And if you think of our friend Bob, when the $5 is laying there in the urinal, the question is, should I get my money back? But once he takes the $50 out and he throws the $50 in there, the question shifts from should I get my money to how am I going to get my money? And the moment you ask the question how, everything changes.
Right, and everything else shows up in your life too. So it is a little bit of path of least resistance there, because once you're committed, everything else sort of seemingly falls into place. And once you ask the how, the who, the what, the players, the people you need, the resources you need, they start to sort of manifest. Do you find that to be true in the work you're doing with your clients, Rory?
Absolutely, absolutely, and certainly in my own life. The first 10,000 times I said I was going to be a New York Times bestselling author, I never believed it. But when you say it over and over, you stop questioning whether or not it is possible, and you just ask, how is it possible? And what happens is there's like new forces that come alive, and you open up and you notice things that you wouldn't have otherwise noticed. When you ask the question how, I'm open to an answer coming. When I'm asking the question, should I do this, then I'm not open to the answer showing up. And it's kind of like when the student is ready, the teach, or when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's kind of like when someone makes a commitment, the answer appears. But before they make that commitment, the answer isn't there, because when you ask the question how, it's like, how will I hit that target? How will I meet that deadline? How will I lose this weight? How will I launch this business? How will I save this marriage? How? And that question, how, is a take the stairs choice. It's something you have to teach yourself to do. But once you do it, it ends up making your life easier, not harder. Again, it's the great paradox of self-discipline and the whole sort of take the stairs methodology.
And you have to get out of your own way. Once you make that commitment and you ask that big question, how, you have to get out of your own way and just let it sort of unfold a little bit too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, asking the question how helps you get out of your own way.
Yeah, and take that foot off the gas pedal a little bit and let it show up. You also talk about, when we talk about like commitment and discipline and doing the things we don't really want to do, but we know we have to. We know we must in order to get the better results, the trimmer body, more clients, whatever those results we're looking for this year. Some people call it the uncomfort zone. To me, this is where the breakthroughs happen and results happen. What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I guess thinking of it as your comfort zone is definitely, or outside the comfort zone is a way to think about it. The thing about being comfortable is it keeps you stuck.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable is only temporary, because then you ultimately define a new normal, which becomes your new comfort zone. I mean, the first time, one of the things that we do with our coaching clients, if they've never done it before, is we really focus hard on driving them to make $100,000 to break that six-figure mark, because for a lot of people that's the first ceiling, and the first time you pass it, everything changes, and you start to realize that, wow, I actually can, make a lot of money, and I do bring a lot of value to the world, and I do, if I work hard, I do deserve to make more. And that's an example of, well, some people would call that you have to be outside your comfort zone. Well, I would say, the comfortable thing is making more than $100,000. So it might be uncomfortable to get there, but the real comfort zone that you want is on the other side of being uncomfortable.
All right, so let's look at one of your clients that you've coached, to get there. What went into that coaching discussion? What was some of the maybe pushback you got from the client, and what happened? What did they do right, I guess, to get to that new sales level or new sales target?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, recently I wrote a mini blog, a mini series on my blog. I write 2 blogs a week and do a podcast every single week, and RoryVadenBlog.com is where it is. It's all free, and I wrote a mini series called The 7 Realizations of Rich People, and we really dissect and break apart that whole thing of earning money and whatnot. But the and the other thing was the podcast guest that I had just last week. It's called, his name is Peter, and he wrote a book called 6 Months, From Dead Broke to Six Figures in 6 Months. And the whole episode is just talking about this, but it ultimately gets down. It's usually, sometimes it's a technical discussion. They need to learn the skills, but almost always it's a mental discussion. And we have these belief barriers. And here's how you can tell where the problem is if I'm talking to a client and we say, look, you're gonna make $150,000 this year. And they go, and what you'll see, if they've never made that amount of money, you'll see them do is they'll go, well, I can't do that. I've never made that much before. I don't even know how to do it. I don't even have a pipeline, or I don't, there's barely enough territory, or and so what happens is they'll immediately go into all the reasons why they can't. And the thing you got to realize is you're either selling yourself on why you can, or you're selling yourself on why you can't, right? So some people, what I used to do, and my undergrad was accounting, and so I used to pride myself on being a realist and a very pragmatic person, which I still very much consider myself that way. But I used to say, well, I just want to be realistic. Well, realistic is just a matter of what you're telling yourself most often. And so it's just as easy to be selling yourself on something bigger as it is to be selling yourself on something smaller. But either way, you're still convincing yourself. So you might as well be convincing yourself towards the positive. And that's a hard thing for some people to get around, because we just, like I grew up in a trailer park with a single mom, and until the time I was 10, we had very little money, and so the idea of ever making hundreds of thousands of dollars in a year just seemed outrageous to me. I mean, the most that she had ever made was like $25,000 or $30,000, and so you grow up inside of this mental prison of what is possible, and a lot of it is defined by who the people are you hang out with and what you expect. Well, now it's different. Now I talk to people every day who make 7 figures a year, and when you're around people who make that much, it's like, wow, and you realize there's not anything different about them. I mean, it's not like they have extraordinary intelligence or even extraordinary work ethic, but they do have an extraordinary attitude. And the way that we define attitude is the way you choose to see things. And you can choose to see something as unrealistic, or you can choose to say, this is something I'm going to go after. But that, and not choosing an attitude is a choice in and of itself. And usually if you don't, what I have learned is that if I'm not consciously choosing a good attitude, I am almost always unconsciously choosing a negative one, or at least a neutral attitude. And what is really fascinating is neutral always becomes negative. Eventually, neutral becomes negative. Neutral isn't good enough. So it's not about, that you have to be like over the top, standing on a chair, beating your chest every day and saying I'm going to change the world. But in your head, you kind of do have to be that way. You kind of have to just sell yourself that it's possible, because it is possible, and it happens every day. I mean, I got a text message from one of our clients a couple weeks ago, who this guy's 34 years old. He's going to make $350,000 this year. He just had twin baby girls, and for Christmas, for his wife, he paid off their house. And it's like, yeah, that's if a 34-year-old can do that, then I can learn how to do it, and I just got to make that decision.
Yeah. Among all the things I did yesterday around my home fires, I managed to watch, I guess it was Saturday, a little bit of NFL football playoffs, and I really love Russell Wilson, with the Seattle Seahawks, and I love what his dad told him. He's 5'10". He's the shortest quarterback in the NFL. Everybody, commented, "Oh, you're too small to play in this league. You might have to go to the CFL up here in Canada." And his dad said, "Why not you, Russell? Why not you? Why isn't it possible for you?" And that was the programming that he grew up with. And he was also taught about, the power of, his self-talk. And then the other thing I think that's really important that he does, like a lot of really good athletes, like Michael Jordan and former the basketball coach for the Chicago Bulls, I forget his name now.
Oh, Phil Jackson.
Yeah. And, is the power of visualization. Do you work with that too with your clients? Do you have them sort of sit down maybe every morning, a half hour, and visualize, and maybe do affirmations and write in their gratitude journals to sort of bring this stuff into existence a little more easier? Do you work with your clients in that way too, Rory?
Absolutely. A lot of people, when they get into coaching, they get in because they think they've had a lack of self-discipline, and
those who can't teach and those who those who can do, is that the
No, I'm sorry. I was talking about the clients. I was talking about the clients. No, all of our coaches are they have to submit a verifiable list of awards as a top producer, and they have to have a minimum of 10 years of experience in personal production. Mm-hmm. So they are all practitioners. We actually don't hire coaches. We really hire top producing salespeople, and then we teach them how to coach. But when people get into coaching because they think they've struggled with self-discipline, like one of the clients, a lot of times what we find is it's not that they struggle as much from a lack of discipline as they do from a lack of vision. They don't have a clear enough picture of what they want for the future, or they don't spend enough time thinking about it, and so they cannot see the connection to how the sacrifices they're asking themselves to make today forward them towards any future that they care about. So there is no context for action to take place. I mean, if you see a clear vision, then and you understand the payoff and it's something that you want, then making the necessary sacrifices is easier. Your discipline engages almost automatically because you see it just as a step on this journey. But if you don't have a clear vision for your life or your future, then there is no context for action because there's at best only a convoluted connection to how any of the sacrifices you're asking yourself to make today forwards you towards some future that you care about, and so it becomes hard for any of us to motivate ourselves. And most people are terrible at vision. It's just not something we learn how to do. In fact, we unlearned it because when we were young, people told us, to don't be a dreamer and stop daydreaming and hey, that's silly, and so all of the natural ability that we had to dream and think about things that aren't yet right in front of us, a lot of us turned off that creativity, and it's a huge detriment. And so we have to help people spend time thinking about it. And so we do affirmations. We do help people write out their affirmations, and affirmations are powerful because words are the first manifestation of your ideas into reality. So for me to say I want to become a New York Times bestselling author, until I say it out loud, it's just this thing that is bouncing around in my head as some idea that I have. but then I speak it, and now I write it down, and it's the first existence of that idea in the real world. Now it exists on paper, and then the next level of that is taking those words and making them into pictures. And so for 5 years, of course, Take the Stairs came out in 2012, so this happened all 3 years ago. But even 5 years before that, every time I would walk into the airport, I would stop and I would go over to the business book section, and I would look at the books, and I would grab one that said New York Times bestseller, and I would take it off the shelf, and I would hold it, and I would just hold it in my hands, and I would just think about my book being there and my name being on the cover one day, and that happened in 2012, and then actually all our books just hit the airports last week, and I saw our new book in the Las Vegas airport, and so there it is again, and so now that's just the new expectation, right? It's like I just expect that that's what's going to happen, and so it's always about just kind of stretching your belief barrier, but it's a total mental game.
So we got to take time out. So some steps we need to do is take time out to work on that mental game every day, it sounds like, huh?
Yeah, and actually the time that I do it, too, is at night. This was one of those, I mentioned the 7 Realizations of Rich People at RoryVadenBlog.com, that series that we wrote. One of the 7 things that was a commonality of wealthy people is they fall asleep at night, and the last thing that they think of is they are thinking in vivid detail about what they want for their life and for their future.
Okay, I like the fact you're doing it at night, because everyone else I hear does it in the morning, and I don't know, the morning is a bit of a crazy time. You got to get the kids off to school. You got to get out, over to your first appointment in the morning. There's emails to attend to. So I like the fact that you're doing it at night and doing that ritual at night.
Yeah.
So do you do also too? Do you combine it with a little gratitude and a gratitude journal
So the way that I do it is I actually, when the alarm goes off in the morning, the first thing I do, and this is again something that you probably won't hear from most people, I hit snooze one time intentionally.
Okay.
And I lay in bed, so I don't go back to sleep though.
Right.
So I hit snooze, and I lay in bed, and I immediately just start saying thank you. And I just start thinking of all of the things that I'm thankful for. That's how I start every morning. Then, when the alarm goes off the next time, I get out of bed, and then I read the Bible for me, and then I read my list of affirmations, and then I review my goals. And then now what I've been doing for the last year, which has been amazing, is I review my wife's goals. And so I look at her goals. And then after that, I'll usually try to read something that is from, something quick that's from a leadership book or something, and then I'll start my day, and so, but all of that can be really quick. It could, the whole thing is 15 minutes, and then at night is when I fall asleep is when I'm thinking in vivid detail. Like reading my affirmations, I'm reading words on a page, but at night I'm trying to see a picture, like of where I'm going to be when this happened, and who's going to be with me, and what can I taste, and what can I smell, what can I touch. I want to see in visceral detail exactly what it looks like when I accomplish this dream, and the amount of your endurance is directly proportionate to the clarity of your vision. When you have a crystal clear picture like that, you automatically engage. And for me, what I love to think about, and I believe that this is actually scientifically proven, is that the last thing that you think before you fall asleep is what your brain still processes on for a couple hours while you fall asleep. And so it's like I have my brain just like while I'm heading off to sleep. I just love the idea of my mind. It's like I'm cutting my mind free to just solve problems and figure out how we're going to make this come true. And I did that when I've done that my whole life, and there's several different major kind of breakthrough accomplishments that I've had for my life that are things I never thought possible, and then I check them off. And they just keep getting bigger and bigger, and it's that process that I've always followed, and I learned it from reading and from our coaching clients, and I was mentored by the late Zig Ziglar, so I knew Zig very well, and their whole family I got to know, really well, and so but I do it.
You even manifested a father that way too, right?
Yeah, that's right. That story about how I met my dad. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to open up the lines for questions. So now's the time. So I'm going to unmute you. Hopefully your lines are clear, or unmute yourself if you have any questions for Rory.
Rory, it's Susanna.
Hey,
Hi, Susanna.
What was the blog that you mentioned?
Oh, if you go to RoryVadenblog.com. So if you go to RoryVadenblog.com, in fact, today's blog post you'll see is that Buffalo story that I just mentioned a few moments ago. So RoryVadenblog.com, and then if you scroll down to the right, you'll see a section called Popular Posts by Category. And one of the categories is making money, building wealth, and getting rich. And if you click on that, it will take you to where we have all of the articles that basically come out of our discussion about rich people and the 7 realizations of rich people. They're all listed right there. So RoryVadenblog.com, and then scroll down on the right to the popular post by category and click on the building. It's called, the link is Making Money, Building Wealth, and Getting Rich.
Sweet. Anybody else have any questions about business, sales, how to turn it around, how to get better results, how to change your thinking? I can unmute you. Oh, I think you got to unmute yourselves, people. All right, let's continue then with the discussion. The other key point you bring up in the book, and I love focus. I think, the power of focus. There's a book called The Power of Focus by Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, and Les Hewitt. And I think that's so important this year, is to have that focus, to really cut out the stuff that doesn't really matter. Just focus on the stuff that really matters in your life. And I think you're going to have an amazing year. I mean, if you do that, just that thing alone, focus and visualize and plan and take the necessary actions, you're going to have an amazing year. Like this time next year, you'll be going, oh, that was 2015, rocked. But one of the other key points you bring up in your book, Rory, is this notion of integrity. And by definition, they say that integrity is the adherence to moral and ethical principles of soundness, moral character, and honesty. I like this definition. The greatness of a man is not how much wealth he acquires, but it's in his integrity and in his ability to affect those around him positively. And that's by Bob Marley. So what's your take on both the definition and Bob Marley's viewpoint?
Yeah, I like them both. I really like them both. I definitely think that integrity matters much more than money does. And people who get those crossed up typically have major issues in their lives. Sooner or later, it catches up with them. I used to think, it's funny, I wrote a blog post about this, about forgiveness and stuff. Something happened in my personal life that was a pretty big deal, and with a friend of mine, and I used to think integrity was doing what you said you were going to do, and I think that's huge, and that is a massive part of integrity. But I think that that really is only half of integrity.
Okay.
The other half of integrity is not doing things that aren't right. So it's not just about doing what you say you're going to do. It's about also not doing the wrong things. So it's related to being a person guided by principles, and so
yeah. So you got to tap into your little inner guidance system a little bit there, and know right from wrong, I guess, where you're concerned. To me,
yeah, that's right.
It's more about being loving, like loving to oneself, like doing what it's like almost doing the most loving act you can do for yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, integrity is a huge strategy. It's a huge advantage in business, and particularly people playing the long-term game. And, I mean, you see examples of it all the time of celebrities and athletes and movie stars and who their career goes up in flames because of a breach of integrity of some kind. And so I think that integrity is huge, and integrity gives your words power. I mean, every time you do something you say you're going to do, to me it adds weight to your words, and people start to believe it, and they start to respond to it, and they start to do something in accordance with what you're saying because they know if you say it, it's true. But people who don't do what they say they're going to do, they lose their ability to lead because people don't believe it. And so saying it doesn't do anything. It doesn't move anybody to action. It doesn't create anything. So your ability to create the life that you love is directly connected to your integrity. And if you look at least a biblical description of how the world is created, regardless of what your faith is, the world is spoken into existence, right? And that is
there was the Word, right?
There is the Word, right? And first there is the Word, and it's like God spoke it. It's like He didn't use some cosmic set of Legos. There wasn't something else. It was like He spoke it. And so if the Bible is true, regardless of whether you believe it or not, if it is true, one of the other things that the Bible tells us is that we are created in God's image. And so if God initiates the onset of creation by speaking and speaking things into existence, it also kind of makes sense, and it seems to have proven to be true in my life and what I've noticed, that the first step of creation is to speak it. And so even if you reject the view, the power of that the creation principle, and then take the stairs, we call it the creation principle of integrity, and it follows this process. You think it, you speak it, you act, it happens. You think it, you speak it, you act, it happens. You think it, you speak it, you act, it happens. So at first it's a thought. Well, then you speak it. That's the onset of creation. That's why affirmations are powerful. I start to say it. And that's why you have to be careful about saying negative things. You don't want to say negative things about yourself because you're also going to create that. And then what happens is once it's out there, right? Like once I've written down, I want to become the world champion of public speaking, then suddenly, in order for me to maintain my integrity, it's like I need to start doing things that live up to that. Because I've said that it's something I want, I've put it out there in the world, even if it's just to myself on a piece of paper. But now, in order for me to really have integrity, I'm going to start taking actions that naturally line up with that. And so as I start doing the actions and I start putting in the work that it takes to do that thing, the inevitable outcome is the result will take place sooner or later.
Okay, well, you talk about that in your book too, when you competed for to be the #1 Toastmaster, and you really busted it to make it happen, and then you said they came in second with this other guy. So how do you deal? What happens then? What happens if we're doing all these right things? We have integrity, we have commitment, we have discipline. And then we come in second. How do we deal with that kind of an adversity?
Yeah, that's a great question, David, and that's one that stumped me for a long time. What about when you're doing everything right and you still have tragedy in your life, or failure, or unexplained setbacks? And that was a good example for me. We didn't tell the whole story here, but basically when I was 22, I decided I wanted to be a speaker, and I thought if I won the World Championship of Public Speaking, that might give me some credibility, and I spent 2 years of my life doing it, and I made it to the top 10 in the world, and I lost the first year, and then I went back again. I made it back again and came in second in the world, but, so it was still a huge success, but not what I was going for. And I think the thing is we got to get this is the hardest of the 7 take the stairs choices, and we call it the perspective principle of faith. And faith is a take the stairs choice. Again, this isn't a religious kind of thing necessarily, but faith is choosing to trust that what is happening now is somehow for a greater good later on. So faith is a choice. It's just to say, I don't understand this, but I'm going to believe that there must be some good reason. And a good way to think about it, let's say you're driving home tonight, and you're driving along, and out of nowhere, boom, you get a flat tire. Well, if somebody asked you at the dinner table, tell me about your day, chances are you would probably tell them about your flat tire, because in the course of one day, a flat tire is a pretty major event.
Yeah, and it's kind of a negative event.
It's a negative event, right? And so I might be like, oh, geez, I had this flat tire, and I got stranded, and I had to get towed, and now the guy's trying to take me for all my money, and like, it's a big deal. But if you're on your deathbed, many, many years from now, and your grandkids are there or whatever, and they say, tell me about your life. Tell me about the highs and lows in your life. It's like, in that moment, do you think that you would tell anybody about the flat tire? Well, probably not. You wouldn't even remember the flat tire. I mean, 2 weeks after you had the flat tire, it'd be completely gone from your memory. You wouldn't even be thinking about it. And that's because a challenge in respect to today is a big problem. Any problem in relation to today is a big problem. But any problem in relation to our lifespan is a small problem. And any problem in relation to eternity is no problem.
Yeah.
So our ability to process failure and tragedy and to have peace, our ability to have peace is directly proportionate to the term of our perspective. I notice that whenever I'm frustrated, it's because I'm only thinking about here and now. But let's say that that flat tire that you had prevented you from getting into a fatal car accident 5 minutes down the road.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you have a different perspective about that flat tire? You absolutely would. Well, the problem is that very well could be exactly what happened, but we don't have the ability to see that. Unless the ability to see the entire future, we aren't entitled to evaluate the reasons why bad things happen to us today. But we can simply choose to say, we can either choose to do the escalator thing and get upset and mad and angry or depressed, or we can take the stairs choice, which is to say, you know what, I don't know why this happened just yet, but I'm going to trust that it was for a greater good. Another great example is, think about the person who broke your heart in high school, who you knew you were just in love with, and then you meet him 20 years later, and you're like, oh, thank goodness I didn't end up with that person.
Exactly.
And so, but that is a choice. Faith is choosing to believe that what is happening now is for the greater glory later on. And so our role isn't to win awards, and I don't think our role is to win awards and to make money and to make accomplishments. Our job is to do our best and forget the rest. We do everything in our power that we can to achieve something, and that's where you put your self-esteem, is in the idea that I did what I knew to do. I did everything that was in my power, and if I do that, then that is what makes me successful, regardless of the outcome. Because outcomes, we don't always have control over outcomes. Sometimes you're in a contest, and it's a completely subjective judging card, and you don't have any control over that. But when you do your best and you forget the rest, you find things continue. They just get better and better and better, and you have more and more peace, and that's really powerful.
I love that. It reminds me, I had a car broke down en route. I live in Toronto, so I was going home to Ottawa, which is the nation's capital up there. That's about 4.5 hour drive, and all of a sudden, my car starts to act up on the way, and the lights go off, and the speedometer goes to zero, and the windows don't work, and the radio. I'm thinking, oh man, the battery, right? So I actually get a stop outside a bed and breakfast in a small town. So thank God I was right by a phone. I think it was almost before cell phones. And I asked to use their phone. I got a tow to the nearest garage, which was like 20 minutes away. They looked at the car. They replaced the battery. Off I went. Well, wouldn't you know, the car broke down again. It wasn't the battery. It was the alternator. So I ended up in another small town closer to my destination, about an hour away, and I ended up at a convenience store, gas bar, whatever, in this small little nothing town. The girl at the desk says, oh, my boyfriend's a mechanic. He'll be right over to help you. He hooks me up with 2 batteries in my car. He happened to have 2 batteries. So on the way back, I was going to drop them off for him. The batteries last me about another 40 minutes. I'm still about a half hour from my destination. My car breaks down again, or almost seizes or stops. And I park outside this house, and I knock on the door, and the guy's been kind of partying. And I said, dude, my car broke down. I got to leave it here until tomorrow and I can pick it up. He said, well, no problem. I said, I think it's my battery and my alternator. He said, oh, no problem. As a matter of fact, my neighbor is a mechanic. He'll be in tomorrow. I can give you his number and you can look at it. I'm not making this up.
Wow.
I call the mechanic. He said, do you want a new alternator or a used one? I said, I'll get the new one. And sure enough, I picked the car up the next day and it worked and off I went. So in all three cases, in all three places, I was totally supported by the universe, which just blew me away.
Cool.
And I actually wrote about that too. So one of the other, we've got a few minutes left here. Also in your book, you talk about scheduling as a key.
Yeah, and I actually have a call, coming up here right on the hour.
Okay, so just, real quick, couple thoughts on scheduling, the correlation between success and scheduling.
Well, yeah, I mean, the new book, Procrastinate on Purpose, is really all about managing time, or what we have exploded the idea of managing your time, and we say that managing your time is era 1 thinking, prioritizing your time is era 2 thinking, and now we are introducing the new generation, which is multiplying your time. Managing your time is about doing things efficiently, and yet we move faster than ever before. We all carry computers in our pockets, and we still never seem to be caught up, and we're always behind. Prioritizing your time is about focusing first on what matters most, and that's what we have thrown around for the last 25 years as the preeminent strategy for productivity. And prioritizing is still good, and efficiency is still good, but they both have limitations. And the limitation to prioritizing that nobody ever talks about is there's nothing about prioritizing that creates more time. All prioritizing does is take item number 7 in your to-do list and bump it up to number 1. Well, what we have discovered basically in the last 3 years is how ultra performers create more time. They literally have figured out ways to create more time. We call multiplying your time. And actually, we put together a free 1-hour webinar, David, which people can check out. If you go to procrastinateonpurpose.com, you can watch a whole free 1-hour webinar on the new book. It's with me. I kind of teach the whole thing, and there's an offer both to buy the new book and to buy the Take the Stairs book, an incredible package bundle deal. So you can check out procrastinateonpurpose.com if you are interested, and you can learn how to multiply time.
Yeah, I like to chunk things down, so I'm not like taking on this big huge project, just a bit at a time, and then eventually you get there. It's like losing weight. If you take off a pound a week, that's 52 pounds by the end of the year. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, just well, we believe in harvest seasons. In a harvest season, rather than trying to be like balanced and do a little bit here and a little bit there, we believe in imbalancing your life in for a short-term period is what will really create the best results. And then you can, like balance is not equal time spread across equal activities. It's appropriate time spread across critical priorities. And if you imbalance your life, you're going to find much more success by imbalancing it in one direction and just getting yourself into shape and making that your major focus. Then once you're in shape, it's a lot easier to maintain a level of health, and then you can kind of maintain that and then focus on getting out of debt. And then once you're out of debt, then you can focus on sort of launching your business, and then you can start like doing these different things. And so we believe that balance is bogus, and it's really a myth, and we kind of talk about that in both Take the Stairs and in Procrastinate on Purpose, and that you're going to have a lot more success doing what we call working double time, part-time for full-time, free time.
Got it. Okay, I love it. So I know you've got to leave. Shameless self-promotion time. Where do we connect with you?
Oh, yeah. I'd say go to procrastinateonpurpose.com. That'll get you plugged into everything. It gives you a free webinar so you can check it out and see what you think. And then we'll stay connected from there. And, of course, you can, if you want to get the books, you can get them there, and there's a great deal. But if not, the webinar is all yours, and it'll help us stay in touch. So procrastinateonpurpose.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rory, and thank you, everybody, for being on today's call. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, David.
Thank you, Rory, and God bless.
Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks, Suzanne.
Bye.
Ciao.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.